To part 3 in my series for refinishing hardwood floors. So we went ahead and took care of the finishing touches on the floor sanding. There you can see the corners are cleared. We scraped those away with a hand scraper. Another thing that you might run into is your transition pieces. Over here you can see there was some tile, some new tile that I laid a little while ago. You had to scrape up some of this stuff right next to it by hand. If you get your sander too close to that tile, it can burn into that tile and leave a mark that you won't be able to get out. So you want to be kind of careful there. You'll see some dark marks in there, and that's okay. Number one, we're going to put a transition piece over there. Number two, I'm going to show you what we do to actually weather the wood. And you'll want to start this process probably about the same time that you actually go in and start sanding your floor, because it takes a couple days for this to set up. And I've got 2 pails here just because we got a lot of square footage here. I might need a second pail there. But this solution, it's real simple. All you do is you put some steel wool pads in a little bucket or Tupperware or whatever you can find, and then fill it with distilled vinegar. And what you'll find is the longer you let this sit, the darker it will make your wood. Typically, what I do is I wait a day or two, so 24, 48 hours. And I did just a little spot over here in the corner. But you can see that when you lay this, you just basically mop this solution onto the wood. And what it will do is that the tannins in the wood react to the steel wool and vinegar solution, and it darkens. And so I just do this little test piece over here. This is after 2 days of the solution sitting. And then over here is after 1 day of the solution sitting. So it can make a little bit of a difference if you wait a couple of days there. So now I'm going to show you, next I'll show you the different instruments that I use to distress the wood. Okay, so the first thing that I made is this chain, and I just attached it to a 2x2. And also within the chain, I put some nuts and bolts in there. And really it's pretty simple how you use this. You just whack it against the floor. Go ahead. Keep going. Alright, you can stop. That's all you do. You do that throughout the whole floor, and it's going to leave little dents and divots. The next one that I'll show you is just a 2x2 that I've put a lot of screws all the way through. And you want to use this sharp end to actually pound a few holes all in the same spot. Go ahead. So if you get close to that, you can see that it kind of looks like, sometimes you'll see this in wood, it looks like just some worms have dug some holes in there. And you can actually do it however you want. I actually like to make it pretty obvious. But again, you do that all over the floor. Another thing you could use is a steel brush. With hand scraping, I don't find this one to be very useful, but some people I've seen will use this to go across the grain and give it some finer scratches. The other thing you can use is just a normal hammer. And all you do is just walk around the room hitting the hammer on the floor. Okay. And that's just going to leave some dents. They're kind of hard to see right now, but after we distress it and put this vinegar solution down, you'll be able to see it. And finally, another thing I'll use is just a chisel. And with a chisel, I like to do just cross-grain scratches. And that's exactly what you don't want to happen on a normal floor. But what this does, It just shows a variation of imperfections so that when you actually get your entire floor done, it looks like it's part of the distressed look here. So we'll go ahead and distress the entire floor, and then I'll show you what it looks like when we wipe on the vinegar steel wool solution. So I put a little more light over here. Just wanted to show you what each one of these tools does. So right here you can see this is from just that regular hammer hitting it kind of at an angle. Gives it kind of a nice half moon shape. Over here, this is actually a series from that chain. And you can see sides of the chain, but this right here looks like the end of the bolt, that round end. This looks like the head of the bolt. It's kind of got that angled shape there. And then you got this nice deep scratch going across the grain. And then of course over here, you got that 2x2 with all those screws through it. It leaves a bunch of nice holes there. So when we get that solution on the floor, we really want to pay attention and make sure that we get plenty of that inside these gouges. And what that's actually going to do is darken up these imperfections really good. One thing that you might be able to see here, right here, you can see some of that when I was talking about the edger. That sander right here has left some small cross grain circular marks, and if you hit that with the solution and then hand scrape it properly, you'll pull up some of the dark weathering and leave these marks in there, and it will look like it has been rough cut. So it kind of gives it that nice textured look, pretty cool. And then we'll put a finish on top of that. Okay, so started laying down the vinegar and steel wool solution. I've gotten the living space done. You can see where it's still wet in some areas and where it started to dry, but you can definitely tell, even when it dries, it's a big difference from just a plain wood floor. So it's going to dry with kind of that gray. In some areas it'll be a darker black, depending on the grain of the wood. And there's really no wrong way to apply this. I'll show you an example here. You just take your solution with a rag and just rub it on, kind of similar to how you would a stain or something like that, except you don't have to wipe it off, you can just let it dry. So it'll actually look kind of clear as you put it on, but as it dries and it gives a little more time, it'll turn gray or black. Alright, so we've started to hand scrape the floor. And just to give you an idea, this is kind of the color of the wood before you start to scrape. And I've started scraping this up, but more or less, this is the look I'm going for. You can see that's where I did the wormholes. There's some scratches and gouges. And right now they just look a little bit gray. But once I put a stain on top of that, they actually turn pretty black. So let me just show you an example of how much hard work it is to hand scrape it, but it'll pay off. Right there. So when you're scraping the floors, obviously this has gotten into the grain of the wood, but sometimes I like to leave just like a line of that weathering. Gives it some texture. So here's an example of a piece of wood that's got no scraping on it. This one's been scraped a little bit. Just depends on how much weathering you want on there as to how much you've got to scrape it. But even though it looks gray right now, once you put kind of a darker finish on it, it'll turn black. So a very important part of the scraping process is you always want to have a file on hand. And this is pretty much just your standard file. It's not too heavy, not too coarse or too fine, it's right in the middle. But after you drag on this scraper for a few times, you'll start to feel it more difficult to pull material up. That's when you know you need to sharpen your edge. And really, with this particular type of hand scraper, I just hit it at about a 45-degree angle, about like that. And you just go both directions on this so that you're not just sharpening one side. And you'll be able to feel it when it's starting to hold the edge and that file's hitting it just right. And you'll be able to tell a big difference when you drag it across the floor. You'll be able to tell that it's pulling up a lot easier. If you do too much of an angle in either direction, that means it's not going to work the same way for you. There's only a certain number of angles that this can hit the floor. So make sure you keep your edge sharp. It'll make your job a lot easier, and that you're filing at the right angle. All right, I just wanted to end this clip in this episode showing you kind of what it looks like after I've scraped the whole floor. It's a little dark over there, but you can see that it's more bare wood than that weathering that I put down. And really, if you take a closer look at it, you can see some of the marks, how it really soaked in that solution, and you can see even how it's heavier in the grain. Here's some marks from the chain. And then I wanted to show you an example of a brand new blade on the scraper, and then this one pretty much spent that one, not going to be able to get much more use out of it. But that just comes from all the filing. And again, the key to getting your floor scraped up nice and easy, or easier, is to make sure that that blade stays nice and sharp. In the next clip, I'm going to show you how to apply your stain. I go with a darker stain. Really makes the grain pop, the weathering pop, all these little marks will pop out. Here's an example of one of those scratches I did across the floor. You can really see that pretty good already. But that's going to make a pop, and then we'll put the clear coat down on it to give it a good protection. And we'll pretty much be done with the floor project. If this video is helpful, please like and subscribe.